Chosen one, stop what you are doing right now and lock every part of your attention onto this message. That restless feeling you have been carrying around all week, the one that keeps telling you something is wrong but you cannot identify what it is, I need you to sit with that for just a moment longer, because I am about to tell you exactly where it is coming from. The enemy is working overtime today for one reason and one reason only. He knows that what I am about to say to you will break the agreement you have unknowingly been living under, and he cannot afford for you to hear it. It all shifts in the next few minutes. The confusion, the second-guessing, the quiet shame you have been carrying like it belongs to you. But here is the part that is going to shake you. It is not shifting because of luck, and it is not shifting because you finally got everything right. It is shifting because of what you have already done, even when you did not know it counted. Think back to that moment this week, when someone pushed you, when the pressure mounted and everything in you wanted to react, to prove yourself, to make them understand. But you did not. You pulled back, you stayed quiet, and in that silence you felt like you had lost something, like restraint was the same as retreat. You have been replaying that moment, wondering if your stillness was surrender. It was not surrender. That moment of restraint was the most precise spiritual move you have made in months. You did not even realize you were executing a strategy that heaven had already written out before you sat down in that room. You did not find this message by accident. The algorithm did not bring you here. The Most High did. This is a divine appointment that was scheduled before the foundations of the earth were laid, and you are standing at the threshold of a conversation that was always meant to find you at exactly this hour. Stay until the very last second of this message, because in the next few minutes, I am going to hand you the unfiltered verdict that exposes the exact lie the enemy has been using to slow your progress. I am going to walk you through the moment you thought disqualified you and show you why it was actually the turning point. And at the end, I'm going to give you the declaration that seals this chapter shut, so the weight you have been carrying cannot follow you into what comes next. Do not click away. Your future self is sitting somewhere in the life you were promised, and that version of you is begging you not to leave this message before the verdict is read. I know what the last 72 hours have felt like. The atmosphere has not just been heavy, it has been suffocating, like the pressure before a storm that refuses to break. Maybe you sat in complete silence this week, not because you were at peace, but because you were too exhausted to pretend anymore. Or maybe you woke up at 3 in the morning this week, with your heart racing, staring at the ceiling with thoughts that were too loud and too specific, feeling like you were being accused of something but you could not name the charge. You feel suspended, like you are floating in a corridor between the life that fell apart and the life you were promised, and nobody told you how long the hallway was going to be. And in that corridor, the enemy has been whispering a very specific lie. Listen to your own thoughts right now, because he is still whispering it. He is telling you that the reason everything feels frozen is because of a mistake you made. He is replaying a scene, a conversation you walked away from, a moment you chose silence over confrontation, a time you pulled back when you could have pushed forward. And he is telling you that because of that moment, you have disqualified yourself, that the blessing saw your hesitation and passed over you, that you had one window and you let it close. But I need you to hear what the scripture actually says about this moment. Nahum 1-9 says, "What do you conspire against the Lord? He will make an utter end of it. Affliction shall not rise up the second time." Listen to that promise. Affliction shall not rise up the second time. The enemy needs you to believe that you have reset the cycle. That because of what you did or did not do, you are back at the beginning, facing the same wilderness, running the same lap. Because if he can convince you of that, he can steal years from you with a single thought. But that is a deception built entirely on the one thing he hopes you never examine, the truth. You are not in a cycle, you are in a conclusion. The heaviness you feel right now is not the weight of punishment, it is the weight of finality. It is the tension that lives in a cord that has been pulled to its absolute limit, one breath away from snapping. What you have been interpreting as the beginning of another hard season is actually the last moment of this one. You think the silence was weakness. You think the withdrawal was failure. You think the moment you did not fight back was the moment you lost. But let me reframe your reality right now. That was not a mistake. That was not weakness. That was not failure. That was the most honest and most powerful thing you have done in a long time. And heaven recorded it. You were never meant to fit. And I think somewhere beneath all the noise, beneath the forced smiles, the explanations you kept giving people who never really asked, beneath the versions of yourself you tried on just to survive the room, you already knew that. You felt it in spaces where everyone else seemed comfortable, and you stood there wondering why you felt like a stranger in a world you'd been living in your whole life. That wasn't dysfunction. That wasn't damage. That was distinction. God doesn't make his chosen ones comfortable in places he's about to pull them out of. You were designed with a divine blueprint that is inherently unique, a masterpiece of intricate design that doesn't align with the mass-produced molds of the world. When you feel that dissonance, that quiet hum of being out of sync, it's not a flaw in your wiring. It's the signature of your divine origin, a signal that you are not meant for the ordinary, for the comfortable settling that characterizes so many. It's the subtle whisper of God's intention, reminding you that your discomfort is not a sign of being broken, but a sign of being set apart. Some messages don't just inform, they activate. If something stirred deep in your spirit just now, you may be ready to receive the Chosen One's blueprint. This sacred guide reveals the 8 divine patterns behind your calling, your suffering, and your destiny. It also comes with the full audiobook, so you can absorb it during prayer, rest, or quiet moments with God. And for those called to speak His truth, you'll also receive Activating Your Prophet Mantle, a powerful bonus ebook for those carrying a prophetic assignment. The link is in the first pinned comment, but only for a limited time. Now let me tell you what's really been happening. Most people who end up in this place, the place of questioning, of isolation, of feeling perpetually out of sync with the world around them, most people are told they need to fix something, that they're too sensitive, too intense, too much, and so they spend years, sometimes decades, trying to sand down the very edges that God sharpened. You don't need to be sanded. You need to understand why you were made with edges in the first place. Imagine trying to smooth the rough, magnificent facets of a diamond until it conforms to the shape of a pebble. That is what the world often asks of you. It sees your intensity, your deep wells of empathy, your unyielding spirit when it comes to truth, and it labels these as imperfections, as flaws to be corrected. But these are not flaws. They are the very tools and contours God meticulously crafted for your unique purpose. Your edges are not a sign of being too much. They are the very boundaries that protect the sacredness of your calling, the sharp clarity that allows you to discern truth from deception, the resilience that will enable you to withstand the storms that will inevitably come your way. God did not create you to be bland and blending. He created you with divine sharpness, with a holy intensity, and with a spirit that is too much for the mundane, but precisely enough for the monumental tasks He has laid before you. There's a pattern hidden in your story that most people have never been taught to see. It's the pattern of preparation that disguises itself as punishment. It's the wilderness that looks like abandonment, but is actually intimacy. Think about Moses. 40 years in Midian, not 40 days, 40 years before a burning bush interrupted everything. The world would have looked at Moses in year 23 and called him a failure. A man with a prince's education, a deliverer's calling, and a shepherd's obscurity. But God wasn't wasting a moment of it. He was building a man who could endure the desert before He led a nation through one. And here you are, in your own desert, wondering if God forgot the address. You might feel like Moses at 80, tending sheep in the desolate landscape of Midian, the memory of his Egyptian prince days fading into a distant dream, his grand calling seeming utterly forgotten. The world would see a man adrift, a life unfulfilled, a prince stripped of his crown and his purpose. But in the quiet solitude of that wilderness, God was not absent. He was intensely present, meticulously shaping Moses' character. Those 40 years were not a punishment for his impetuous attempt at liberation. They were a divine apprenticeship, forging patience in the crucible of obscurity, resilience in the face of relentless heat, and a profound dependence on God that no palace could ever teach. He learned the language of sheep, the subtle signs of the land, the deep rhythms of solitary existence. He was learning to lead the lost by first experiencing his own profound solitude, his own desperate need for guidance. And in your own desert season, that place of questioning, of quiet desperation, of feeling utterly alone and forgotten, know this: God is not absent. He is orchestrating your spiritual formation, honing the very qualities you will need to navigate the promised land He has ordained for you. Your desert is not a sign of His forgetting, but a testament to His meticulous design. He didn't forget, He chose the location. But here's where it goes deeper. The wilderness isn't just about endurance. It's about detachment. Something has to die in you before something greater can live through you. The version of you that needed people's approval, that had to die. The version of you that measured your worth by what was visible, that had to die. The version of you that called God's silence rejection, that interpretation had to be buried so the real understanding could rise. And that process is painful in a way that nothing in the natural world prepares you for, because you can't explain it to people who haven't lived it. You can't make someone understand the breaking who has never needed to be rebuilt from the inside out. This shedding of layers, this profound unlearning, is the heart of spiritual transformation. It's like an old skin, once essential for protection, now too tight and restrictive, needing to be sloughed off so that the new, vibrant life beneath can emerge. The desperate clinging to external validation, the frantic need to prove your worth through achievements or possessions, the misinterpretation of God's quietude as abandonment, these must be willingly surrendered. This process is not a gentle pruning. It is often a profound unearthing, a radical dismantling of the old architecture of the self. It's a spiritual surgery performed with divine precision, where the instruments are often pain and bewilderment. You cannot articulate the depth of this breaking to those who have only known the comfort of the familiar, just as you cannot describe the taste of exotic fruit to someone who has only ever eaten apples. It is a journey into the unseen architecture of the soul, a place where the very foundations of your identity are re-examined and relaid by the master builder. And this leads us to something most people miss entirely. The reason your breaking felt so personal, so targeted, is because it was. Not targeted by the enemy, though he tried to use it. Targeted by God. Chosen ones don't get generic preparation. They get custom-designed crucibles. Your specific heartbreak, your specific betrayal, your specific season of invisibility. None of that was random. It was surgical. God was removing things from you that would have destroyed you at the level He's taking you to. The attachments that felt like love but were actually anchors. The relationships that felt like community but were actually ceilings. The identities that felt like you but were actually costumes worn so long you forgot they weren't skin. Think of a master sculptor working on a magnificent statue. They don't chip away randomly. Each strike of the chisel is deliberate, precise, intended to reveal the form hidden within the raw stone. Your divine Father is no less intentional. He sees the magnificent, world-changing destiny woven into the fabric of your being, and He knows precisely what needs to be removed, refined, or reshaped to bring that destiny to fruition. Those painful experiences, those deep wounds, those stretches of feeling unseen, they were not arbitrary blows from an indifferent universe or even malicious attacks from an enemy seeking your downfall. They were precise interventions, surgical removals of hindrances you couldn't see, attachments that would have dragged you down instead of lifting you up, relationships that stifled your growth rather than fostering it, and false selves that prevented your true essence from shining through. God's work in you is not a broad brushstroke. It is a masterpiece of intimate, targeted intervention, designed for the grand scale of His purposes. Coming up, There's a hidden agreement you've been carrying that has been quietly undermining every breakthrough you've stepped toward. Stay with me, because once you see it, you cannot unsee it. But before we get there, you need to understand what's been happening in the spirit during this season that felt like silence. Because heaven was never quiet. You just couldn't hear the frequency. When Elijah collapsed under the juniper tree and said he'd had enough, when he lay down in his exhaustion and his despair, God didn't send a sermon. He sent an angel with bread and water, twice. Because before God speaks the next assignment, He restores the body that will carry it. Your fatigue is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that you've been in real battle. And sometimes, the most spiritual thing you can do is rest in the knowledge that God tends to the ones He's about to send. Consider the weary soldier collapsing on the battlefield after a grueling skirmish. The commander does not immediately issue new orders. First, the soldier is given water, sustenance, and a moment to recover. So it is with God. Your exhaustion, your moments of profound weariness, are not indications that you are falling behind or failing in your spiritual warfare. They are evidence that you have been actively engaged in the conflict, that you have been pushing back against darkness. And in those moments of deepest depletion, God's response is not condemnation, but tender restoration. An angel with bread and water, a divine provision of nourishment and strength. He is tending to your physical, emotional, and spiritual vessel because He knows it must be replenished before it can be entrusted with the next wave of His purposes. Your rest is not idleness, it is vital recalibration, a sacred time of divine replenishment before you are sent forth again. Now, once you understand that the silence was restoration and not rejection, you're ready for this. There is a war over your voice specifically, not just your life in general, your voice. The enemy doesn't attack people who have nothing to say. He attacks the ones whose words carry the power to wake people up, shift atmospheres, break generational patterns, and call things that are not as though they are. If you have been silenced by circumstances, by people, by your own fear, that silencing was strategic, because a chosen one who discovers the authority in their voice becomes impossible to stop. And something has been working very hard to make sure you never find out just how dangerous your obedience truly is. Your voice is not merely a tool for communication. It is an extension of God's creative power, a conduit through which His will is made manifest on earth. When you speak His truth, when you declare His promises, when you even simply speak from a place of divinely inspired conviction, you are wielding a power that can shatter chains, dismantle strongholds, and bring life where there was barrenness. This is why the enemy so fiercely targets the voices of the chosen. He knows that a word spoken in divine alignment can undo years of his destructive work. If you have found yourself muted, your words caught in your throat, your pronouncement stifled, understand that this silencing was not an accident. It was a calculated attempt to disarm you, to keep you from accessing the immense authority God has placed within your vocal cords. Your obedience, expressed through your voice, is a potent force, and your enemy fears its disruptive potential. And what's coming next will likely surprise you. It always does. Because here's the thing about authority. You've been waiting for permission that has already been granted. You've been looking for a sign that has already been given. You've been asking God to open a door, and standing in front of a door that has been open since the moment He called you. But you have been staring at the door so long you stopped seeing the open. Fear does that. Fear dresses itself in discernment. Fear sounds like wisdom. It says, wait a little longer. You're not ready. What if it doesn't work? What will people say? And because it sounds reasonable, you call it patience. But patience and paralysis are not the same thing. Patience trusts and moves. Paralysis waits and hides. You have been like a thirsty traveler, standing at a pristine well, convinced it is sealed shut because you haven't heard the sound of the bucket being drawn. The permission, the signs, the open doors, they are not future events to be acquired. They are present realities already established by your calling. Your authority isn't something you earn or receive. It is something you embody. something that has been inherent in your designation since the dawn of time. But fear, that insidious counterfeiter, can masquerade as prudence. It whispers caution, cloaked in the language of wisdom and discernment, urging you to remain in a state of perpetual readiness, of almost there. It freezes you at the threshold, making you mistake inaction for divine timing. True patience, however, is an active faith, a confident movement forward in the knowledge of God's already established promises. Paralysis, on the other hand, is a passive surrender to the illusion of limitation, a self-imposed confinement that prevents you from stepping through the very gates that stand ajar. Think of Esther. She had access to the king. She had the position, the proximity, and the moment. And yet she hesitated, not because she lacked courage, but because the cost was real and visible. It was Mordecai's confrontation that cut through it. Who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this? That question didn't give Esther new information. It gave her permission to act on what she already knew. You don't need more confirmation. You need the courage to honor what has already been confirmed. Esther stood on the precipice of history, holding the fate of her people in her hands, privy to the king's ear, yet frozen by the immense danger. Her hesitation was not cowardice, but a profound awareness of the stakes involved. Mordecai's words were not a revelation of a new destiny, but a powerful echo of the truth she already carried within her soul. He didn't present her with new data. He confronted her with the inherent significance of her current position, compelling her to acknowledge the divine orchestration of her life. He awakened her to the fact that her access, her placement, her very presence in the palace was not accidental, but a divine appointment for precisely that critical juncture. You too possess this inherent knowledge. You have felt the stirrings, seen the signs, received the quiet confirmations. What you need now is not further evidence, but the boldness to align your actions with the truth that has already been undeniably revealed to your spirit. But let me challenge you with something, because this is the part that changes the trajectory of everything. You have been praying for God to move in your situation, but there is a deeper question underneath that prayer that you haven't fully faced. And the question is this: have you been asking God to change your circumstances so you don't have to change yourself? Because transformation doesn't come to a life that's comfortable. It comes to a life that's surrendered. And surrender isn't a one-time event. It's a daily decision to release the version of the story you wrote and trust the one God is writing, even when His version includes chapters that don't make sense to you yet. It is a profound and often uncomfortable realization that our prayers can sometimes be a subtle plea for God to rearrange the external world to accommodate our unchanged internal state. We ask for the storm to pass so we can remain in the same place, rather than praying for the strength to navigate the tempest. True transformation is not about God bending the world to your will, but about you yielding your will to His. Surrender is not a passive resignation. It is an active, moment-by-moment covenant, a conscious choice to relinquish the reins of your own self-authored narrative, to release the meticulously crafted plot twists and character arcs you have designed, and to embrace the grand, unfolding epic that the divine author has penned for you. This means trusting the chapters that seem illogical, the plot points that feel like contradictions, and the characters that challenge your preconceived notions, knowing that His story is always leading you towards the most profound and glorious conclusion. Here's the part no one wants to hear. Some of the delays in your life have not been caused by the enemy. They have been caused by your unaddressed agreements. An agreement is what happens when a lie gets said to you enough times that you stop questioning it and start organizing your life around it. Someone said you were too much, and you agreed. Someone said you'd never be chosen, and you agreed. Someone's absence told you that you weren't worth staying for, and you agreed. And now those agreements live in your nervous system like permanent residents, influencing your decisions, limiting your asks, shrinking your expectation of what God is willing to do in a life like yours. Until you evict those agreements by name, they will continue to govern your life from the inside. These unaddressed agreements are like insidious roots that have burrowed deep into the soil of your soul, subtly but powerfully constricting the flow of divine life and hindering your growth. They are the whispered condemnations, the casual dismissals, the silent implications that have been absorbed and internalized until they have become the bedrock of your identity. These are not mere thoughts. They are deeply embedded narratives that shape your perception of yourself and your capacity to receive from God. They dictate the boundaries of your ambition, the scope of your faith, and the very definition of what you believe is possible for your life. These agreements have taken up residence within your very being, influencing your subconscious patterns and your conscious choices, acting as invisible barriers to the breakthroughs God intends for you. To overcome them, you must not only recognize their presence, but actively and decisively evict them, naming them for the lies they are and declaring them null and void in the authority of Christ. And just when you think you've seen it all, there's one more layer, because here is the unexpected truth, the one that reframes everything you just heard. The thing that has been blocking your breakthrough is not your enemy. It is not your past. It is not even the agreements, as real as they are. The deepest blocker is this: you have been more committed to understanding your calling than to walking in it. You have studied the pattern. You have sought the confirmation. You have done the inner work, read the word, waited in the waiting rooms of God's timing. And all of that is holy. But at some point, and that point is now, the chosen one must stop preparing to walk and simply walk. The disciples didn't fully understand what they were being sent to do. Jesus said, "Go, and I will be with you." The "with you" was not a reward for understanding. It was a companion for obedience. You will not figure it all out before you move. You will figure it out as you move. And the miracle that is waiting for you is not on the other side of more preparation. It is on the other side of your next step. You have been like a scholar meticulously studying ancient maps, charting every possible route, analyzing every topographical detail, yet remaining firmly planted in the library. While the pursuit of understanding is valuable, and the diligent study of God's word and his timing is sacred, there comes a pivotal moment where the map must be folded and the journey begun. Jesus did not require his disciples to have a complete theological treatise on the kingdom of God before sending them out. He simply commanded them to go, trusting that his presence, the "with you," would be their guide and their strength. Your calling is not a puzzle to be solved before you step into it. It is a path to be walked, a dynamic unfolding that occurs as you move forward in faith. The true miracle is not found in the perfection of your preparation, but in the courage of your obedience, in the bold step taken into the unknown, trusting that his power will manifest through your willingness to simply walk. So tonight, before you sleep, place your hand on your heart and declare this with me: I release every lie that told me I was too much or not enough. I release the agreements I made in pain, in confusion, and in seasons I didn't yet have the understanding to interpret. I renounce every false identity I wore to survive spaces that were never meant to hold me. I declare that my wilderness was not abandonment. It was preparation. My silence was not rejection. It was restoration. My delay was not denial. It was divine positioning. I step forward now, not when I have more clarity, not when the road is more visible. I step forward now. Because I am seen, I am known. I am chosen not because I earned it, but because God decided it before I drew a single breath. And from this moment, I walk as someone who believes that, fully, without apology, without retreat. My voice is free, my calling is confirmed, and my breakthrough is not coming. It is already here.